Welcome to the ChairLife podcast with Tom Cuthbert. As a CEO coach and master chair, Tom brings you the insights, strategies, and tools to help you build your chair life, where mission and purpose intersect with a balanced work life. This is the path to leading with impact while living with intention. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Tom Cuthbert.
Welcome back to the ChairLife podcast. I am fresh off sabbatical and had a fantastic month. I really appreciate my members supporting me through this. And sorry I wasn't able to push out any podcasts, but it was not on my list for the month of July. We're back with some great content that hopefully will be helpful for you. And if you're curious about my sabbatical, maybe how to schedule one for yourself in the future, you can go to my website, tomcuthbert.com/sabbatical. and see what I did and how I build it. This episode begins a 3-part series on branding for Vistage Chairs. It also could be really branding for anyone, any type of consultant or leader for that matter. All of us are a brand. And so we're going to talk today about starting that process. We're going to talk about unveiling your authentic identity and how you can set that up and schedule that and present that and have others repeat that in your community. So your brand will be spread and you'll be known so that you can help more people build your groups and build and live your chair life. If there's one quote that I think will help you as you navigate this series, it's simply this. It's not about what you do. It's about what you do does for others. And I say that, and it's kind of an awkward quote, but it's really not about what we do. There's a lot of people that do what we do or what we say we do or the way that we're perceived to do what we do. But the reality is when we can convey to others what we do does for them, then they will be interested. And so that's really the way we're going to navigate this today. Today we'll start with kind of an overview, some core concepts. I'll give you a couple of examples. Then I'm going to step you through some questions and I'll give you some resources for our next couple podcasts to be thinking about as you work and build your own brand in your community. Now, one other thing for you to think about along the way, because this is probably the most difficult part. When we are asked in a networking environment, what do we do? If we simply answer that with, I'm a Vistage Chair, or I'm a CEO coach, or I'm a consultant, or I'm this, or I'm that, that kind of ends the conversation. So the idea is to answer that question with something that invites other questions. And the way that I do that is I use a tagline. And for me, it's I spend 1,000 hours a year in private, closed-door conversations with CEOs. There are a number of variations of that I've used, and we'll talk about many of those through this series. But I say that up front because I really want to challenge you to think about who are you and how you could answer that question, what do you do, with a phrase that invites another question. That gives you the opportunity to describe in more detail what you do and what you do does for others. Over the last few years, I've really enjoyed reading Donald Miller's book on StoryBrand. He also has another book called Coach Builder. Both are excellent. Both are really built to help support us and other brands to build out these concepts. And one thing that Miller talks about is the StoryBrand book talks about the guide. And we are guides. That is who we are through this process. And I'll give you a resource from him and talk to you through this series about how I've kind of built that in my own world. You know, you think about great brands, it's easy to think about company brands, Google or McDonald's or Microsoft, and they all have their own brand attributes. But I also like to think about people who have brands that easily come to mind. Some people are intentional with wanting others to see who and how they are, and others just have brand attributes because of the way they've lived life. A couple of examples that come to mind are Ryan Reynolds, who's obviously very charismatic and witty and comes across as a very authentic actor, but he's also a smart business owner. He owns Aviation Gin, Mint Mobile, and in addition to all the movies, he's been very intentional about the attributes that he wants people to see in him, and he leverages those not only in his movies as an actor and someone that most of us know, but he does that in his businesses as well. His humor, his innovation, and so for us, thinking about who and how we are in a similar sense is our own brand. Oprah Winfrey is an iconic person and brand and is always viewed as empathetic and inspiring and transformative and trusted, etc. So, those are attributes that she presents, and I think she's probably been very intentional over the years about that. Elon Musk is someone who I think very highly of in a lot of ways, but also has brand attributes that he probably didn't intend to push out there. He's certainly very visionary, and he's a risk taker and relentless and all those type things. There's also some brand attributes that he has that may not be quite as favorable. Either way, it's not as much about who they are as a being, but from a broader standpoint, it's more about how they have intentionally crafted the brand around them so that other people can see them in a certain way. And it's the same for us. Donald Miller in StoryBrand has the following quote: "People don't buy the best products. They buy the products they can understand the fastest." And the foundation of that for us as Vistage Chairs in particular is understanding who and how we are as a person. Are we someone that people can trust? Are we someone that people can look up to? Are we someone that has experience, that has a member's best interests at heart? And if we can't communicate that before even interacting with them, we're not going to have the opportunity to interact with them. And I believe it's the same way for every brand. So when I start this process and I think about a brand, whether it's Visa or Heinz Ketchup or whatever, I think about just they built that brand and being intentional about it by asking a series of questions. And so let me run through these questions for you and just think about, in the context of the work that we do, how we could leverage these questions to build our own intentional brand. First of all, who are we? What is our from? What is our background? What is our story? Then you can think about, what do we do? Answering the obvious question of the work that we do, but rephrasing that to, what is it that we do? What does that do for others? What does that do for our members? What does that do for our clients? What does that do for our community? And thinking about the outcomes of where we are, where they are, more importantly, and where we want them to go, that's how we would tell part of that story. Painting a picture of vision. What does the future look like? How do we connect with the future? And how do we help people get to there in the future? What wave are we riding? As part of our story, are there things in our past or background or present that give people confidence that the waves that we're riding can help them achieve where they want to go in the future? Really important question for any brand, and really to make us unique as a human is a very difficult thing to do. But it's simply the question of what makes us the only. Now, the only is extremely difficult to be because there are so many people that do the work that we do in various ways. But when we can find attributes about ourselves that are very unique, and you could argue are the only, then that really sets us apart. Other things to think about when reflecting on ourselves is, what should we add about ourselves? What things could we really want to add in our lives that would be attractive to those that we're wanting to serve and help? And conversely, what things do we want to take away or subtract? Who loves us? Who really thinks highly of us? And the best way to identify your own unique brand attributes is to ask those that you work with. What are the things that brought you to me? What are the things that you feel and find value from? And just taking note of that is helpful. How do we explain ourselves? This is something we'll spend a little time on in the third episode of, answering that question. What do you do? And how do we explain what we do to others and what we do does for them? How do we spread the word? How do we ask for referrals? How do we build a culture of referrals? I've talked a lot about that with you guys on this podcast and in scale-up sessions. But that is the key to success in building a strong ChairLife and community of Vistage members or other members, other participants, is to have referrals working strongly, to have others so impressed and dependent and plugged in and engaged with what we're doing that they want to invite others into that world. And then the last two are pretty simple. It's, what do they experience when they're here? What are the things that we are known for? What are the things that they will experience and be part of? And in our community, those are high-performing behaviors. Those are things that we talk about every meeting and often in one-to-ones and other conversations. So they know exactly what's expected from them, what's expected from others, and what they'll experience. And then the last one is, how do they connect with us? What is your process of connecting with member candidates and working them through that process? And that's something that I'll be talking more about through this as well. So when you start working on your brand and you start answering these questions and you start asking your members and others in your community what makes you unique, what draws them in, listen for some simple stats. Vistage as a corporation has some stats about what it means to be a member and the growth rate. I've been tracking for the last several years with my members, revenue growth for them, number of member companies that experience growth, margin growth, and most recently really focusing in on improving enterprise value. And I did an episode on that. But when you have some metrics like that, when you can say things like over the last year, 100% of our member companies experienced growth. When you could say over the last year, 87% had record years in sales and profits, things like that, telling stories about member successes and recognitions that they've won and goals that they've hit. Those are all critical things to do. It's very important for us to come up with things that we can describe and use quickly that are bullet points or stats about our community that resonate with those that are considering joining it. Another thing that you'll want to put in your branding quiver, so to speak, are a couple of quick sentences that you can drop in that express the value that you have. One that I use quite often when people ask me about, they're asking more detailed questions about what I do or, why are you a CEO coach and those type things. I simply say, my job is to help others see what they're not seeing by asking questions that no one else will. And that's a compelling statement. It's something pretty unique and it's pretty memorable. And the thing about that question, and there's of course many others and some that we'll talk about along the way and that you'll explore in your own journey. When you have a question like that, it's going to resonate with the type of person that you want in your community. It's going to resonate with your ideal client. Not everyone wants someone to challenge them, to ask them questions, to push them, to be in an environment of accountability. And so when we can develop questions and statements that resonate and a bell goes off in the mind of the person that we're speaking with, wow, that is interesting to me. That sounds like the type of community I would want to be in. Then you have a great list of questions to engage with others. So the last idea or thought for you is don't take this process as a weekend project or something you'll knock out over an afternoon. It literally takes weeks. Janie Smith's book on competitive advantage, we'll put a link to that in the show notes, is a great starting point. And in fact, when she spoke to one of my groups many years ago, it was her conversation with me that helped me begin to think about my own personal brand and what is my competitive advantage in the marketplace and how do I articulate that to be different than other options that people might have when they're looking at us or other places to go get coaching or become part of a community. I started at that time to journal just for a few months, literally, around what I thought my own brand attributes were and how do I articulate those and share them with others. And that journal included asking members, what do you experience from interacting with me, from our community, from our groups, from our one-to-ones? And they gave me a lot of words and phrases that I was able to build into an attributes chart. I'm giving you a copy of that. There'll be a link to the one that will prompt you to think about your own unique attributes. And in the next episode, we'll talk about how to both identify those specifically, express those, and have others experience those before they get into your community. The other thing that I'll attach, and we'll talk more about in episode 3, is Donald Miller's StoryBrand guide plan. So it's basically a flow chart, if you will, of thinking about who your ideal member is and client or prospect and how you as the guide can help them and just connect that into a Pixar-like story that you're basically telling to them through your own brand attributes. So hopefully that's been helpful for you. It's a starting point at least. You've got a lot of questions. You've got some resources. You've got some ideas, some worksheets. So begin that process, and I'll be back next week to share what comes next on your brand journey.
Now it's time for Tom's tips and tricks to optimize your productivity and your chair life.
A few days ago, there was a Wall Street Journal article that really caught my eye. It was about how miserable is the word that it used and disengaged a lot of mid-level managers and leaders are. It really caught me not off guard because I hear some of it, but the scope and scale and some of the reasons that these leaders are not engaged were pretty amazing to me. So in an effort to help us help our CEOs and members and community increase engagement, I thought I would share the article. I'll give you a link to it at the end in the show notes, but also kind of walk through some of the things and talk about how we can help our CEOs deal with this. So a couple of things that jumped out from the article. It said that only 27% of managers are engaged. That's down 3% from last year. It's the young managers, it's the under 35 and women, honestly, that have the lowest level of involvement and that are most disengaged. And as we know, when we have leaders that are disengaged, it kills our teams, it hurts innovation, it certainly creates turnover and retention issues. And for me, going into group meetings with CEOs next week, this is a top topic. This is something that I want to make sure they are aware of. And so I'll be sharing this information with them, and feel free to share this podcast segment with them if that's useful. So in addition to all of the things that they're feeling, it just makes me wonder, where does that come from? So here's a few things that the article pointed out, and I think these are spot on. The first, obviously, is the inflation and just the economy and the volatility in the markets. For those graduating college right now, it's the longest search that they've had. It's taking 20% longer than it has the last few years for jobs to be filled. And in fact, for mid-level jobs, the jobs of those that are most disengaged, it's taking 6 months to fill that. That has to create uncertainty and fear and concern from this level leader, and really for a lot of the leaders that we have inside our organizations. Uncertainty has been the word that has had the greatest effect on the economy as I record this in August 2025. There's uncertainty internationally, there's uncertainty with tariffs, there's uncertainty as to where the job market goes. And you add to that just some of the post-pandemic reshuffling, the application of AI to create productivity enhancements, automating tasks, demanding new skills from leaders that they haven't had in the last few years. They need to go back and learn more. They're also juggling a lot. They're juggling chainsaws in a hurricane, so to speak, and it could be exhausting for them. The last thing that leaders, all leaders, but particularly young leaders need is they need a roadmap. They need to know that there is a path for them to both learn and grow and excel in the roles that they're in today, but to know where and how they can grow in the future. So how can we help? What can we do to avoid turnover and improve retention? What can we do to increase engagement? What can we do to help them guide a path to help these leaders move from here to there, to reach their potential and feel good about where they are and navigate this uncertainty that is just the economic reality of where we are today? Well, the first thing we can do is talk about it. We can talk about it in all of our groups, but certainly with our CEOs. It is at the top of my list to discuss with them next week. I want them to bring in a sentiment of where they think these managers and director mid-level people are, how they're feeling. I want them to have some preliminary conversations before we get together as a group and just make sure we're all seeing and feeling and thinking the same things. Talking about it with the other groups, our key group, our emerging leader group, our advancing leader group, are all critical for us. Getting these conversations out there and in the open and let people know that we're aware of it and know that we're working on it as best we can, given the headwinds, is something that's critical for us. Peter Drucker has a great quote that fits here perfectly. The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act with yesterday's logic. Yesterday's logic, where we were 6 months ago, a year ago, or even 3 or 5 years ago, is not applying. It should not be applied to where we are right now. It's a different world and it's constantly changing. And one could argue that it's changing now more so than it has in the past. So in addition to those conversations, in addition to having our CEOs and our other level leaders lean in, talk to these folks, what else can we do? Well, quite honestly, it goes back to things that we've been talking about in this podcast. Every CEO should have a person in a key group. Their right-hand person should be in a key group with a group of peers that are facing the same challenges, learning and growing together from speakers, from our community, and from our leadership as chairs. And this is the time to lean into CEOs and let them know if they have someone they value inside their company and they want to retain that person and grow that person potentially into be their replacement in the future, that person needs to be in a key group. The other thing is advancing leaders, people that are managing managers and working cross-functionally, need to be in those programs. We need to have multiple people from companies in those programs. We're filling out our emerging and advancing leaders this month as we've kind of gone through a new cycle. And finding people to fit in there is simply a matter of looking at the org chart and seeing who is up and to the right. Who are those people that you really see as a lot of potential and high performers that you want to invest in? They should be in an advancing leader. The emerging leaders, the first-time leaders, those that are moving up, those that are new to management and leadership should be in an emerging leader group. And so now more than ever, as we're poised for an economic recovery, as we're poised for growth, after we navigate this uncertainty, and who knows when that comes, but it's coming at some point, we need to be sure that our team is ready for that. And those programs, the Vistage development programs, are absolutely what we need to lean into on that. We also have a Spark City Academy, a program that I launched a few months ago that I'll share more about here in the near future. But it's another way to develop young leaders and make sure that they're getting trained, they're feeling that they're being invested in, and it gives your CEOs a competitive edge. So those are the steps that I see. Lean in. Have the conversations, bring it to the forefront with our CEOs, our key group members, and our other level leaders, and make sure that our CEOs know now is the time to invest in those leaders for growth, for retention, and to prepare us for the economic tailwinds that are coming over the next several years. I hope that was helpful for you. I appreciate you listening, appreciate you sharing this podcast with others if it's useful for them, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the ChairLife podcast. Remember, you can find more resources at tomcuthbert.com. Please let others know about our podcast by sending them to chairlifepodcast.com. See you next time on the ChairLife podcast.